Hi, everyone. Really great to be with you this afternoon. Thanks so much for giving us your time. I'm Adam Bant. I'm the Federal Member of Parliament for Melbourne and the leader of the Greens, and I'm coming to you from Wurundjeri country live from lockdown in Melbourne. And I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and pay respect to elders past and present, and acknowledge that wherever we are, if you're watching this on this country called Australia, then we're all on stolen land, and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded over these lands, and we've got a lot of work to do in this country to ensure that we tell the truth about the past, and also then after we've had a process of reconciliation and healing, move forward with a treaty with our First Nations people. It's critical to our healing and our truth-telling as a country. I really want to thank you all for joining us. We've got some really exciting people that are going to be speaking to you over the next half an hour about the terrible and deteriorating situation in Afghanistan at the moment, something that I'm sure many of you have been certainly following over many, many years, but particularly it's grabbed everyone's attention over the last week as forces, Australian and American forces, have withdrawn and left a situation where now the Taliban is gaining effective control over large parts of the country. And it's something that has meant a lot for not only people who want to see peace and justice and proper treatment of refugees around the world, but also people who've got family members and contacts and friends who are in that country, who are now in a really serious situation, and who many people have been working really, really hard over the last few days to support. And one of those who's been working incredibly, incredibly hard is Diana Saeed, who's the Chief Executive Officer, the CEO of the Australian Muslim Women's Centre for Human Rights, amongst many other things. And I'll ask Diana to introduce herself in a moment and tell us a bit about her and her background. And Diana joins myself and Janet Rice, Senator Janet Rice, who's the Senator for Victoria, who is also our Foreign Affairs spokesperson, who has been working really tirelessly over the last few days in particular as the emergency has unfolded in Kabul in particular, but in Afghanistan in general, as we've been working really, really hard to bring as many people as possible to safety. But first, I just want to say hi, Diana, and thanks very much for giving us your time. And I know you must be pretty knackered after the last week, because I'm sure, and I know that you've been working really, really hard with you and your team. But can you tell us a bit? A lot of people will know you, and a lot of people have heard what you've been fighting for some time. But can you just introduce yourself to the people who might not know, and then tell us a bit about what your last week has been like and what you've been working on?
Sure. Thanks, Adam, and thanks, Janet, and or your team as well, in particular, to secure my very precious time at the moment. The situation is evolving incredibly quickly. But before I go into any of that detail, I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm calling in from Naarm, from the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people of the East Kulin Nation, and to acknowledge elders past and present, and that this is, was, and always will be Aboriginal land. My pronouns are she and her. And as Adam mentioned, probably some of your listeners may or may not know me, but I am Diana Sayed. I'm the CEO of the Australian Muslim Women's Centre for Human Rights, but I'm also a human rights lawyer myself, having worked and advocated and campaigned for quite a number of years on a lot of issues pertaining to the Middle East, North Africa, working with human rights defenders here in Australia as well, so-called Australia, on issues pertaining to all of our sort of communities, refugee communities as well. And I am Afghan, a former refugee from Afghanistan. My parents came out here in the 80s. And, I do firmly believe that, that my citizenship here in Australia, and it's because I'm so invested here in this country, that I do believe that we can be better and we can do better. And it's exactly why I refuse to be quiet or silenced on this matter. And the last couple of weeks have been just, I don't even actually have the word to capture it. It's been a combination of feeling grief and heartbreak and devastation. And I can't even speak on behalf of the entire diaspora community, because all of my immediate family left in the 80s as well. So I have extended family and friends and people that I've worked with in the past, but I can't even begin to imagine what it's like for people who are here in Australia, in the diaspora community, who have their immediate friends, their family, they have their partners, they have children there still currently stuck trying to get out. So really, it's heartbreaking on all accounts and fronts.
And I mean, this is, the Greens' position is that this is a conflict and a war where Australia has been part of an invading force that has contributed to the destabilisation of a country. And of course, this, the history of Afghanistan is one of constant, many invasions and having to deal with that kind of destabilisation over many, many years. So it's a situation where certainly the way that the Greens see it is that Australia has played a role in creating this crisis. And look, there will be lots of discussions about whether or not there should have been the withdrawal at the time that they did, or in the manner that has happened. But one of the things, I guess, that is crystal clear, that no matter which part of the political spectrum you come from or what view you take about the history of the conflict there, we've now got a lot of people who need help, including people who, of course, there are many who are Australian citizens, but there's also people who might be on other forms of visas, or who are, we might be talking about family members of people who are Australian citizens or Australian permanent residents. What's to give us a sense about the most important things that you've been asking for from the government, and what it is that's the most critical thing that you've been working on over the last few days to try and bring people to safety?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there, Adam, in terms of the historical context of why we're currently in this situation at the moment. And it's multifaceted. It's complex, but it's not. There was intervention. There's been a lot of destabilizing forces, and Afghanistan itself has been very geopolitically used as a pawn, whether during the proxy wars with the US and the former USSR, and then from there the Taliban in the 90s, and who's funding who from what sides. And basically, for all those listening in at home, highly encourage you to go away and read more about Afghanistan. But, if it's not Islamabad and the Pakistanis on one side who are, very much backing the Taliban, and the negotiations that were being had in Doha with Trump, and the so-called peace deals, which has sort of led to the Afghans themselves feeling very let down and sold out, because the former Afghan government then has fled in the last couple of weeks. There's a lot there to unpack in terms of reading the situation. It's not just the Taliban has come back, or the intervention was bad, or the failures have been on all accounts, on all fronts. And the people who ultimately are paying the highest price in all of this are the Afghan citizens, people who have invested in the country, who really had a firm belief that the future was a lot brighter than what is currently unfolding. So there is a lot there, but we are in crisis, and that has to be the top message that comes through, that at the moment, with the situation unfolding, it's shifting every day, and we are making our voices heard, because there are so many Afghans here in Australia in the diaspora that are just trying to secure the safe evacuation of their families. That is front of mind now. But the larger campaign calls are around Australia's obligations and moral imperative, not just because of the 20-year involvement and the intervention post 9/11. We saw it just about 6 months ago now, with the Brereton report that came out documenting, the the damning allegations of war crimes that were committed by the Australian Defence Forces in Afghanistan. And not one person has been held accountable to date for that. So there's multi-layers in terms of why Australia has that moral imperative. We also need to know that we've got precedents. We've done it with the Vietnamese. We did it with the Chinese after Tiananmen Square. We did it with the Syrians after Tony Abbott announced that we would be joining the US-led coalition forces in 2015. So all of these respective moments in history predicate that Australia has precedents to now act and, grant a 20,000 separate additional humanitarian intake for Afghan refugees, as well as, there's family reunification. There's a lot of Afghan refugees here that are on temporary protection visas who they don't have any pathways to permanent protection. So our calls are multifaceted, and I urge people to go to our website for actionforafghanistan.com.au, which outlines all of our key calls.
Great, thanks, Jana. We should talk about that a bit more in a moment, but I just want to underscore a couple of critical points that you made. The government needs to immediately grant asylum to 20,000 people from Afghanistan who are wanting to come here, and that's got to be in addition to the humanitarian intake that Australia already has, which of course should be higher. But we've got to recognise this for a crisis that it is and deal with that urgent situation. And you also made the really important point that there are lots of people right here, right now, who are on a temporary visa who have come here from Afghanistan at some point, who now clearly can't go back. And so immediately they need to be, their future here needs to be safe and secure as well. Now, Janet, Janet Rice is the Greens Foreign Affairs spokesperson and the Senator for Victoria. And Janet, you've been working some pretty long hours over the last few days, like Diana, to deal with the immediate crisis. You've heard Diana talk about the urgent need that exists at the moment, and I think it's something that everyone in this country would agree with. Tell us a bit about what's been going on and the work that's being done, and this, in many senses, how everyone at this moment is pulling together in the crisis that we're in.
Yeah, well, it's absolutely a crisis situation that we've been in that's been unfolding over the last week. That has been pretty evident as soon as the US announced that their troops were going to withdraw, that because the government had basically been corrupt, essentially a corrupt government had been propped up by the US, that as soon as the US troops were withdrawing, that it was pretty clear that it wasn't going to survive. We feel that we should have been getting people out, long ago, which didn't happen. So now we're in this crisis situation of, the Taliban saying, yep, every US force has got to be out by the next Tuesday, the 31st of August. And so then it's been a matter of, well, how many people can we evacuate in that short time period? So since last Friday, when sort of the operation on the ground started, it's just been, everyone has seen the media footage, the news coverage of the tens of thousands of people, that sort of chaos and the mass of people desperate to leave and desperate to get on a flight to get out. So our Greens teams have really been working together across the country, and together with organisations right around the country, with Afghan diaspora organisations, working with people across the globe. We've basically been part of this web of people, good people across the roads, across the globe, pulling together, doing what we can to be getting as many people as we possibly can out before next Tuesday. So we've been working in very close relationship and with both the Foreign Minister's office, the Foreign Minister and the Immigration Minister, and escalating cases up to them, putting together some lists to say, here you go, here are the people that are, there's a lot of them of people that have got partners in Australia, and, the absolutely tragic stories of people who have had visa applications in for their partners for 2 years or even more that have not been given those visa applications. And so really pushing, them up to the top of the queue and say, look, we have got this obligation to be at least getting these people who have got partners in Australia out. And then, of course, other humanitarian cases. And it really seemed from the beginning that the government was, rightly focused on Australians, but we've been also saying, look, we need to be accepting asylum seekers on humanitarian grounds, because we help create the problem. And so the least that we can be doing in this crisis situation is giving people a passage out to safety. Just today, I mean, it's been, every day has been different. Every day it's been, you know, negotiating with and talking with the Foreign Minister's office and the Immigration Minister's office, and working out exactly what the situation on the ground is. We're in the very bleak situation now that it looks like the people in the airport are probably going to get out, but it's really, there's only very, very slim chances of anybody that's not yet in the airport of being able to be on a flight out. So that is just devastating. We don't know. There may be some, you know, there's still 3 or 4 days to go, and what I've learned in the last 5 days, it is every day has absolutely been different. So maybe there will be some more opportunities for people to get on flights out, but now it's, you know, working out, having got, I think the Australian government has said there are 4,000 people that we've managed to evacuate out, and so it's, you know, while knowing that it's so tragic because there are so many people that you know, we haven't been able to get out, but those 4,000 people, at least that has occurred, and we need to keep on working on the government to say this isn't going to be over on next Tuesday. That, you know, we do need to have that intake of at least 20,000 refugees from, you know, asylum seekers from Afghanistan being settled as an extra intake in Australia. And we need to be working out how we, as part of the global community, can be creating the pathways for that to occur. And that's what certainly myself and Nick McKim, who's our immigration spokesperson, are really, you know, absolutely committed to continuing that work, and continuing on from the massive week that we have had over the past week.
I would echo those sentiments, Janet, and just, you know, the fact that so much has transpired in the last 2 weeks really just even goes to show that the upswell of public sentiment and really pushing at a local MP level, signing petitions, the donations that have been, you know, coming through has been incredible. And it, you know, as a seasoned campaigner, I've actually in my entire life, and I'm not even sure, I know this sounds biased, but it's actually not. I've never seen this level of sort of broad-based, sort of bipartisan support right now that is just streaming in. It's overwhelming that no matter where you sit in the political spectrum, it is overwhelming that right now we have this moral obligation to Afghans. We understand, like, people have really updated their thinking in terms of buying into these sort of colonial racist tropes around refugees. Even like, people know now that people don't voluntarily up and leave their homes. They don't want to be just kind of in this chaos that the Kabul airport is you know, in right now, and all the sort of media photos that are streaming out. Like, no one chooses that for themselves or for their children. No one wants to leave their home countries or their watan, as we say in Dari, you know, and they're putting themselves at risk because there's genuine fear that staying under whatever Taliban regime that will be rolled out puts the whole country at risk. And it's women and children, it's their families. Like, I don't want to just, you know, reduce it down, but it is, you know, we have at-risk communities who are particularly going to be targeted, and that is women and children, that is other ethnic minorities, that is people who have worked as human rights defenders, activists, journalists. You know, we've seen all sorts of groups. So that just goes to show how broad-based the threat is that they pose. And I know that as Afghans, we can hold multi feelings towards the government that fled as well. Like, we can, you know, we want agency and we want to self-determine and govern our own country as well. And we can critique the government that's fled for the corruption and the, you know, siphoning off of foreign aid and whatever they did. And we can't also, you know, we can critique the Western intervention post 9/11 as well, but we have to also stand with all of those feelings and say that right now, you know, the politicization of the situation buying into any of these ideas around refugees or not coming to Australia. It's just not the time for politicization and pontification, like, and hand wringing. I'm seeing everyone just being like, oh no, this is so hard. It's actually really not. If there's political will behind this, and by people actually voicing their concerns, and I know everyone at home is probably dialing in from lockdown and different situations that they're facing in their personal lives, but this is actually something that history will judge. And it's a moment, it's an actual moment. And I've never experienced this before. And we're so involved now that we actually can't step back from this. We can't even try and blame or play fault lines around whether it was US or what Biden did or what Trump's doing or what's happening on the ground. We can do more.
Yeah. And as you said, we've in the past, a really important point you made before is that in Australia, we've actually done better in the past. Like in response to the war in Vietnam, we opened our doors and we did it after the Tiananmen Square massacre. And so this is not unprecedented in Australia. And so it's now about, as you said, like whatever you think about the history, whatever you think about what shouldn't have happened in the past, we're dealing with this crisis now. And we have, as a country, stepped up before and said, this is something that we've got to deal with, and taken in people who are fleeing this terrible situation where many people are at risk of their lives. And so we've talked about the need for the Australian government to accept in an additional 20,000 people and also provide support to people who are here. Deanna, as you said, there will be lots of people now, many of them are in lockdown, but people who are watching this wanting to join in putting that pressure on the government to say, look, it's great that we've got 4,000 people to safety so far, but there's a lot more who need our assistance, and let's do now what Australian governments have done in the past. Let's do it again. What can people do? People who are watching this, people who are at home, people who want to see something happen. What is it that they can do to help bring that pressure to bear on the government to act in the way that we've done before?
Yeah, and I think that people often, and I don't know sometimes whether it's tall poppy syndrome or it's imposter, or people think that their voices are too small to be heard, but actually collectively, if everyone signs the petition, if everyone actually reaches out to their local members of parliament, this is a huge litmus test. Like, they're watching, they're waiting. If there is enough pressure that is brought to bear and is mounting, even your social media accounts, anything that you post on Afghanistan, I would urge you to follow Afghans. There are so many here who are lobbying, who are organising. Please centre our voices and our calls to action, and look to us as the leaders on who you should be supporting, where you should be donating your money, and what actions you should be taking. So this is great. Thank you for the platform. There are a plethora of other Afghans that I am learning so much from, and they're incredible next generation. We are the children of the first refugees that came out of Afghanistan. We have so many skills now that we actually can't be ignored anymore, which I'm so proud to say that they're the next generation coming through.
And one of those skills is campaigning. So can you, where's the website? What can people do?
Yeah.
Tell us about the petitions and where they can go and send a letter to their local MP.
Yeah, well, last week we mobilised. We've got a web page that's out. It's www.actionforafghanistan.com.au. You can see that our open letter that went live last week, there's a link to the petition on change.org. We hit 200,000 yesterday. And then through that, you can also see the link tree, which has all the donations. But in addition to that, and I'm sure you'll put it in the comments, the Save Afghanistan is the MP letter. So you just have to put in your postcode and you can send a letter. You can customise it, but it's already there. The template that you can send to your MPs. I'd also encourage people to call their local MP offices. If you're in lockdown, we would have taken to the streets if we weren't in lockdown here in Victoria, and we would have mobilised around that. But in lieu of that, social media, please, anything you're posting on Afghanistan, please make sure it's with the hashtag Action for Afghanistan, because we need action now. We don't need you to save us. We need your action.
Thanks, Janet. Janet, you've been an MP. You know that what it's like to be on the receiving end of petitions and phone calls, and it absolutely works.
Absolutely does.
What are your final comments?
Oh, look, it's to take action, and I think there is, because people have seen this crisis unfolding on their television screens. People do understand that this is a crisis situation, and these are people that really need a passage to safety, and so take action to try and get that 20,000 special intake of refugees a reality in Australia. And by taking that action, I absolutely agree, picking up the phone is a great thing to do, and getting your MP, they're representing you, they need to hear your voices to say this is the right thing for Australia to do.
Yeah, so that we've dropped the links in the comments, and I want to thank Janet for all of the work that you and your team have been doing over the last few days. And Deanna, look, thanks for giving us your time. I know your time at the moment is working around literally saving lives and making a big difference. But coming and talking to us and letting people know that they can actually make a difference at the moment and actually join in putting that pressure on has been absolutely, we really want to thank you for giving us your time, being really generous with our time. And I hope for everyone who's been watching and joining us, and thanks for giving us your Thursday afternoon as well, know that the distressing scenes that we're all witnessing are something that we can do something about. Here in Australia, we do have instances where we've been generous and where we've responded to crises before and actually made a difference. We've got a lot of people currently in the country right now who have fled persecution and have fled insecurity. And as Deanna has said, you don't do that lightly. You only do that if that is something that you feel like you've got no other option. And there are people who are already here. There are people who are trying to get here. And there's things that we could do that would make a real difference. So I just want to thank you all for joining us. Thanks again, Deanna. Thanks again, Janet. And everyone, actionforafghanistan.com.au, and post that hashtag action, because that's what we want and that's what we need. Thanks very much for all joining us, and we'll see you again next time.
Thanks everyone.
Janet, thank you, everyone. Bye.